Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and prop preview for today's Black Friday football matchup between the Raiders and the Chiefs. Got to make sure you're ready for all of your exposure this afternoon. With first off, a look at the Draftkings DFS side, what I'm doing over there with my Showdown lineups. And then afterwards, a look through Underdog and Prize Picks and a few props I've entered on each site. You might want to consider adding to a few slips yourself. So it's not dilly-dally, not waste any time at all. It started off with first off, a look at the Showdown side. The Chiefs are sizable favorites for tonight, but unfortunately, they're going to be priced up to account for that. So the ownership is actually a little bit flatter than you would imagine, as a lot of the Las Vegas players are significantly cheaper than what you have there in Kansas City. So it's one of the more proper slates, I think, when it comes to the pricing, which means that rather than seeing all 4-2 Chiefs lineups or even a bunch of 5-1 Chiefs lineups, I think you're going to see a lot more 4-2 Chiefs and a lot of 3-3s mixed in as well. You can see you've got guys like O'Connell at $8,800 and $8,000 Jacoby Myers is an extremely soft price tag, but even if it's an Amir Abdullah, he might be the number one running back for Las Vegas again. Trey Tucker down here at $4,400. It is really easy to squeeze in some of these buybacks for Las Vegas, so I would say I agree with the spread out here, heavily favoring Kansas City. It's a relatively low total as well. They're in the lower 40 range in terms of your over-under, but I don't think it's as much of a blowout as a lot of people are expecting. The last time these two teams played, the Raiders really kept it close, and we've seen Kansas City play down to quite a few opponents this year and have to have a last-second field goal to go out there and get some of these wins. So I think that today could be a little bit misleading if you think it's going to be an absolute blowout, but of course, Kansas City is probably the team that's going to get the job done. But before we go player by player, I do want to point out some of the injury news heading into lock. First off, Isaiah Pacheco will be playing over here for today. His role, his usage is still up in the air, might be a little bit limited, still eased back into action a little bit, but is going to be active for this afternoon. It's going to take away from Kareem Hunt a little bit, but he's still probably going to be the lead back. We'll have to see just how many touches that Pacheco is going to get, though. Outside of that, we have Alexander Mattison, who is technically questionable, but currently projected out in my projections. And then also Matthew Wright, who's going to be at kicker over there for the Chiefs for an injured Butker and Schrader. So make sure you're using the right kicker out there for Kansas City if you decide to use so. But outside of Madison, there's no real moving pieces heading into lock. We already know the news out there with Pacheco. I guess the usage rates, that beat reporter kind of stuff, might change a little bit up there, but not that much that we have to worry about heading into today. So let's talk about a few players here, player by player. So we're going to start at the very top end of the board with Patrick Mahomes at $10,800. At first, I thought it was way too expensive with them as massive favorites. When I took a look at some of the sportsbook lines, they still think that Patrick Mahomes is going to be throwing. In fact, his pass attempt prop is at like 33.5 on books, and he is juiced towards the over at that sort of number. So even with them being nearly 2-score favorites against Las Vegas, they think that he's going to throw the ball quite a bit. He's got over a 250-yard passing line. His passing touchdown line is heavily juiced towards the over at 1.5. So don't sleep on him, even against this Las Vegas team. So 21.7 points in terms of his raw projection. That is about a 2x points per dollar. So despite having that kind of price tag, he projects as one of the better plays on the entire slate. But unfortunately, you are going to pay for that when it comes to the ownership and the actual salary. So it's expensive, especially if you went with him at the captain spot. And in terms of his captain ownership, I have him at just under 30% there. So it's pretty prohibitive. I would say in general, you don't have to fade him just because he is 80% owned, but you're really not going to have any leverage to be had if you go out there and use him. So not my favorite play at captain, especially if he's going to be 30% owned at that spot. While you might go out there, give us 20 to 25 fantasy points, which is going to be really solid out there at captain. I think that there's a really good chance that whether it's a Kelsey, one of the two running backs for Kansas City, a Hopkins, a Worthy, any one of those skill position guys a little bit further down the board that could get into that 25 to 30 point range. We're on a PPR site like Draftkings, where if you score one, especially if you're scoring 2 touchdowns as a skill position player, it's hard to think that that sort of guy isn't outscoring a Mahomes. To get to 30 to 35 fantasy points, a non-rushing quarterback like Mahomes is going to have to throw like 5, maybe even 6 touchdowns to get to that kind of fantasy score. So I just think it's a little bit more realistic. Maybe it's a Kelsey be thrown into that conversation as well, that I would rather have at that captain position. Speaking about these tight ends, let's go ahead and just lump Bowers and Kelsey together. They're a little bit more expensive than I would like, especially when we're going to talk about some wide receivers here in the 8K range. I think bring a lot of upside to the slate. But Bowers and Kelsey are still in play. They're not my favorite plays because of the price tag. They're even in play over there at the captain spot, as both are not going to be nearly as chalky as what you have there with Mahomes. So Brock Bowers, he saw 13 targets a few weeks ago. He's had games of over 10 receptions this year. He's a PPR monster. That is his way to go out there and get to the optimal. He gets it close to 10 receptions, he scores a touchdown. There's a good chance, even if the Chiefs go out there and win, that he could be the optimal captain on this sort of slate. So even if I'm going with a 4-2 Chiefs lineup with 4 Chiefs and then 2 Raiders out there, I'm not against using a Brock Bowers as a captain, even with 4 players from Kansas City as, a quote-unquote buyback in that sort of lineup. So he's a high usage player. Him, Jacoby Myers really are that entire offense, especially when you have the running backs Zamir White and then Alexander Mattison potentially rolled out for this evening. You got Travis Kelsey. Last time these two teams played, Bowers had an okay game, but Kelsey went absolutely off. So if you're looking at the matchups, perhaps a decent play, and the projections with his touchdown equity, I actually prefer a Travis Kelsey tonight. So both getting some ownership, undoubtedly would expect that with these top end players, but decent matchups for both as well. We got Pacheco. He's the real X factor for tonight. If you're looking for some ownership leverage towards the top, there's one clear option. Everyone up here is like 35 to maybe 50% owned. Outside of Pacheco, who's here 18.3%. If you used him at captain, that would be instantly getting different to the field right there. But $9,200, there are real question marks about how much he's going to play tonight. So if we get a report that Pacheco is going to be the lead back, that will obviously increase his projection. Would probably put him closer to like a 12.5, 13 point projection. Would take away from Kareem Hunt on the other side, but that would also increase his ownership. So without that sort of news, the current standing that we have, I don't think Pacheco is the kind of play that you'd use in cash. You certainly might avoid him in some of your higher dollar single entries, that sort of thing. But in a GPP format, like you're entering the big, 50 cent GPP, the big $5 GPP, even the big $25 if you're a big high roller out there for tonight, maybe you consider using Pacheco in that kind of format, as he's going to be a way to get different to the field. And that's really the gold mine. That's what we're looking for in those large field GPPs. When you have to beat 50 to 100,000 other entries, somebody like Pacheco is not only going to give you leverage that you desperately need in those kind of formats, but also a way to get different, not duplicate yourself with a bunch of other people in that contest. So $9,200, he's not my favorite play in cash at least, but I think there's upside with Pacheco in his first game back. Kareem Hunt, same thing. He is there at about 36% ownership though, so I don't have him nearly as low owned as he probably should be. So if he's still going to get some chalk despite Pacheco being back, I'm probably going to be underweight on a player like Kareem Hunt. So a lot of my decision on these running backs for Kansas City is going to come down to that news that we get before lock. But as of right now, I actually think I like Pacheco a little bit more than Kareem Hunt just because of the ownership. And even in like a single entry, a cash kind of format, I don't think I like Kareem Hunt tonight just because he's likely not going to get as much usage as what we've seen over the last month or so. Next up, we got an Aiden O'Connell here at $8,800. This range, by the way, I would even include Xavier Worley down here in the 7K range, is probably my favorite spot on the entire board, especially the guys from Las Vegas like a Myers, O'Connell here at $8,800 are way cheaper than they should be. Jacoby Myers has a 5.5 reception line, maybe not as elite as somebody like a Brock Bowers, who's up there at 6.5 receptions, but Jacoby Myers is still expected to be a massive part of this offense. So at $8,000, he's one of the best projecting plays on the slate at over 1.6 points per dollar value. And same thing with Aiden O'Connell. He's over 1.5x points per dollar value. DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, maybe not the most efficient plays when it comes to their price tag, but they have a ton of upside. We could see Hopkins score 1 or 2 touchdowns like he's already done out there in the Chiefs uniform. We could see a Xavier Worthy go off with one of those gadget plays for a big touchdown like we've already seen multiple times this year. this is the GPP range that I really like. Aiden O'Connell, Jacoby Myers are core plays for me, probably regardless of the format that I'm entering. DeAndre Hopkins, Xavier Worthy, this is where I'm trying to get some leverage out there in my GPP lineups. I think there's a lot of upside with Hopkins and a Worthy, and potentially even using Hopkins at the captain position. So you can see Myers, I've got it about 10% ownership at captain. I'm still going to use him there, as I think, that price tag is very efficient at just 12 grand at captain. But even at DeAndre Hopkins, who's $12,600 out there at the captain spot, he's red zone dependent, he's touchdown dependent, but that's kind of what we're looking for in one of these players. As previously mentioned, Mahomes may give us that like 25-point performance, but if we need somebody to go out there and maybe score 30 fantasy points, by the way, like 25 fantasy points for Hopkins would be optimal over 25 for Mahomes, as he's going to cost you way less and give you the same price if they go out there and scored that same raw fantasy score. So that's why I prefer guys like a Hopkins, O'Connell, even like a Myers down here at $8,000, because they don't have to score you 30, 35 fantasy points to be the optimal captain. Like you'd have to if you're going to cost $16,000. Moving down to this value tier range, you've got guys like a Chiefs defense there. You got the Raiders defense the whole way down there at $3,200. Chiefs defense, way too expensive for my liking. So large field GPPs, if I'm going with like a 5-1 Chiefs or a 4-2 Chiefs lineup, I don't think it's the worst idea, as they are relatively low owned. They're at about 22%, but the price tag is just a little bit too hard to get over there, especially when you have guys like an Amir Abdullah here at about $5,800. He's going to likely be the lead back tonight. A lot of that depends on this Alexander Madison news, but if he's out, Amir Abdullah is going to be the lead back once again. He's more of a receiving back, which is favorable on a PPR website like Draftkings, where all those receptions are just going to give him even more fantasy points on top of his performance. And if he's the lead back, potentially has some red zone upside as well. So even if you're going with a buyback, I don't hate Amir Abdullah just because he does have that receiving upside out of the backfield. If he was more of a traditional running back, maybe not my favorite play, as they are sizable underdogs here for this afternoon, but because of that aspect of his game is a little bit more script proof than he otherwise would be. A Matthew Wright, Daniel Carlson, very average plays in my opinion. These kickers are usually the kind of plays that I'm about matching the field on in most cases. This slate is going to be no different. Trey Tucker here at $4,400. He is my favorite play down here in this, I don't want to call it true value range, as we're still here at about $4,000, but he's my favorite play in this like 3 to 5K range. He's got the highest projection, the best points per dollar value outside of a Noah Gray. Noah Gray, by the way, is my second favorite play here in this range at about 1.8x points per dollar value. Noah Gray, by the way, is juiced for his over at 2.5 receptions. And Trey Tucker, he's also at a 2.5, even 3.5 reception line out there in a few books. And he's got some big play upside. So these aren't the kind of plays that you're expecting to get 20, 25 fantasy points. That's why I wouldn't really ever consider them out there for the captain. I'm usually going to somebody that's at least like $6,000 out there for my captain. But Trey Tucker, Noah Gray are the great kind of guys to round out the lineup, right? Maybe they're your 5th, maybe 6th man in out there in a more balanced build. That's where I like those sort of plays. A Juju, you can look for a little bit of leverage out there in GPPs. Not as safe as a Tucker or a Gray, but he has been seeing snaps out there for Kansas City. And last week actually outsnapped DeAndre Hopkins. So perhaps a little bit of a trend to, pay attention to. The sportsbook lines are not reflecting that he's likely going to see that again, but at least is on the table for him to get some extra usage. Samaje Perine, if for some reason the Chiefs were playing from behind, Samaje Perine would be a fantastic buyback to any Raiders-led lineup, as he's the more receiving back out there for Kansas City. And even with Pacheco coming back, Hunt in the mix, if they're playing from behind, Perine is the running back that you're going to see. So if you're planning on playing any 4-2 Raiders lineups, you might want to consider Samaje Perine as one of the two, even like a 3-3 lineup, one of the 3 guys that you would be taking from Kansas City. You've also got a Justin Watson down here. He's a big play threat, so large field GPPs, he would be in play. DJ Turner, he's likely going to play some snaps for the Raiders, but he's dependent on one of those big plays to get there. You can say the same thing about a Mecole Hardman, should see the field, but these kind of guys right here, these are GPP only sort of plays. They're all sub 10% owned. You can see over there, 9.2, 9.7% over there at the flex position. So easy to get over the field on, easy to include in your player pool if you're playing like 150 50 lineups, but not so much when you're playing a single entry or even just some of your like higher dollar GPPs. I like a Michael Mayer down here. If I was going to choose a pure punt play, I think Michael Mayer would be my favorite just because he does have that receiving touchdown upside. He's going to play probably the same kind of snaps as like a Watson, Turner, Herdman. These are like 20 to maybe 30 percenters when it comes to their snap share. But Mayer, he's going to play a lot of his snaps down there in the red zone. And we've already seen him go out there and cash in on touchdowns before. And those backup, second string, sometimes even third string tight ends over here for Showdown are oftentimes what you need out there in terms of a punt. So I'm including him. Carson Steele with Pacheco back is probably not going to play very much. This guy, Dylan, I don't even know his last name, Lob or something like that. I honestly don't know who he is. He hardly even plays out there for Las Vegas. If you're going to go with a pure punt at running back for Las Vegas, it's probably the Sincere McCormick guy. Last time around, he saw a pretty significant snap share, and most importantly, he had like 6 rushes for like over 28 yards, had a few receptions out of the backfield. He projects for 4 fantasy points, and he's only $800. So if there's anyone to go out there and play, it might be this McCormick guy who was elevated from the practice squad on Friday. So he is expected to go out there and play today, which by the way, could be a little bit of why I'm expecting Madison not to play, right? If they brought somebody up from the practice squad already, it kind of tells me that they're expecting Madison not to be available. And if Madison is out, if you need somebody, and this is to open up like a Mahomes at captain, one of those like Bowers or Kelsey at captain sort of lineups, you can afford that rather easily if you go to a player like McCormick down low. So this Lob guy, haven't heard much about him. Honestly, don't even know what he looks like, which is saying something out there for these players. I know almost every single player in the National Football League Association. But yeah, Sincere McCormick, the guy that you'd probably want out there for the Raiders. This Ramel Keenan guy out there for Las Vegas, he has not played very much this season, but at the very least is in my projections and in large scale GPPs, I guess is somebody that you can't completely overlook. And now for the prop side of things, we're going to go through a few props I've already entered. You might want to keep an eye on yourself. So we're actually going to start over here on Prize Picks. We first off have this over on Jacoby Myers receptions, which is a demon prop at this point. It's a little bit of a boosted payout over here on this over. Something that he's hit in 4 of his last 5 games. And as the day has gone on, he's gone from about minus 150 for his under, hence why you get the boosted payout, to a lot closer to even money. And on most books, he's in that minus 130 range, maybe minus 135 at the very most, if not closer to minus 115 to minus 120 for his under. So as the day has gone on, this has gone from what should have probably been a boosted payout to maybe something that should just be at 5.5 receptions and even money, considering that the Raiders are such underdogs, nearly a 2-score underdogs in this sort of matchup. He's also gone over this in most of his games recently. You can see why I'd be trying to take this over. So it is a tough matchup against some of those cornerbacks over there in Kansas City, but given how many times we're expecting Aiden O'Connell to have to drop back and throw the football, I don't think this is the worst situation when it gives you a 3.5x payout. So a pretty significant boost. They did have the same prop over there on Underdog, but the payout boost on Prize Picks was a lot larger than what you get on that side of things. So that's why we took it over here on this site. And then the other prop that we're mixing in is this over on Patrick Mahomes passing attempts, which over here on Underdog just got a little bit of a payout shift. So that's why I actually wanted to start over here, as the better payout for this prop would be on the Prize Pick side. He's minus 125 for his over on Draftkings. That was the last time I checked. And then minus 130 for the over on FanDuel, which was kind of surprising the first time that I saw it, if I'm being frank. As massive favorites, a lot of times people are hammering the under on those sort of spots. But because the Raiders tend to play the Chiefs a lot tougher than what the spread would usually indicate, and also because the Raiders are a decent run defense, they're not the best, usually because of game script. Usually game script makes them not the best plays when it comes to defending the run, but they are about an average defense at defending the run and fantasy points allowed per game, but they're bottom 5 in the league at defending a passing attacks. So even with their relatively poor record, even with their struggles this year, it has been a lot of people passing against the Raiders rather than going with the run. So after doing that deep dive, I've come along on this prop, obviously, and hence why I'm taking the over with that plus EV value. So this would pay you a 3.5 5x over here on Prize Picks. The actual combination that I took with Jacoby Myers was an under on Kareem Hunt touchdown. So this Mahomes prop was something that I entered over here on Underdog. The reason why I included it over here on Prize Picks, as the main prop I was going to give you guys here on Prize Picks got ripped off the board just before I went and recorded this. It was an under on Kareem Hunt touchdowns. He was at 0.5 in even money. And with Isaiah Pacheco coming back into the mix, you see the odds for Kareem Hunt really dwindling for his under. So he was minus 143 at one point for the under in Pinnacle. I think the last check it was like minus 130 for the under on that side. So if he was going to be even money over here on Prize Picks, that's why I wanted to take that under. The reason I mentioned that is maybe they repost that Kareem Hunt prop. If they do, you might want to consider taking the under over there with Jacoby Myers. And then over here on the Underdog side, we also have two props that I took. First off is this Patrick Mahomes over. That was also a prop that I took. I guess if you wanted to take that Kareem Hunt under, you could. It does have a multiplier over here on the Underdog side. So I guess just to give you guys two slips with the actual four props that I took, we'll mix it in over here. So the payout's going to be a little bit lower than what I got personally. I got a 3x payout over here with my slip with Kareem Hunt, but he's still an under that I would play with the sportsbook value. So you guys know my thought process there, right? Minus 130, minus 140 for the under. And with Pacheco coming back, that's going to be some, carries taken away. And Pacheco is a big bruising back down there in the red zone. They could be red zone carries that are getting taken away. And then this over in Brock Bowers, that was something that I liked as well. It is available, I believe, at 60 over here on Prize Picks. So, if you're somebody that plays on Prize Picks, you might want to play it over here. Again, the issue is that the Kareem Hunt prop isn't going to be over there. So that's it's kind of annoying how they have this set up, but obviously play these props wherever you guys want to. But I still like this over on Brock Bowers. He's at 62.5 on DraftKings. He was minus 125 for the over. A lot of other books either have him at 61.5 and juice towards the over, or 62.5 and over, like we had there in DraftKings. And he's at 6.5 receptions. And though he was juiced like minus 135, even like minus 140 for the under this morning, he's now close to even money on most books at 6.5, which tells us that he's going to get a ton of usage, at least if that line holds up tonight. And against Kansas City, that would make a lot of sense. They've got some really good cornerbacks over there, but their middle linebackers, even some of their safeties, aren't the best at defending opposing tight ends. So though Brock Bowers didn't have the biggest game the last time around, it was actually Kelsey that had the better game between the two. I would argue that this time around, that Bowers is likely to be that player. He's got the better matchup in paper, the better game script as well to go out there and get some extra usage. So obviously, I like these guys like Myers. I like these guys like a Brock Bowers. They're the clear number one, number two wide receivers, maybe tight end like Bowers, over there on the Raiders in a losing game script, playing from behind. So I think those are pretty much no-brainers for either side. But this under at Kareem Hunt has a lot to do with Pacheco coming back. And then I already told you guys about this line here with Mahomes. And look at that, right? He got bumped to 34 live as we were recording that there. So yeah, maybe you do take that over there on Prize Picks, and we hope that we get that Kareem Hunt pop reposted over here on Prize Picks. So we'll have to see if they do so. Obviously, as of right now, they don't have it up here, as they only have his 1.5 line posted. Make sure to check out my Patreon page for all the content that I'm posting, guys. If you guys want to catch all of these slips as soon as I'm entering myself, make sure to get all of the lines before they end up moving in one direction or the other. Make sure to join the Patreon page. A link in the description of the video to go out there and join that and get all the behind the scenes access to what I'm entering. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got for the Black Friday football preview. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for your action this afternoon. Let's go out there, make it a good one, and hopefully take down a GPP or two and cash out on those prop slips. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content to come. We'll have a main slate preview dropping at some point tomorrow, a Monday night football preview, the rest of the schedule covered over there for the NFL, as well as all the golf content and NFL content in 2025. Should be a good one. I'm looking forward to this afternoon. It's a nice treat to have some football here on a Friday afternoon, so let's take advantage. Let's cherish in it. Hopefully you guys had a fantastic Thanksgiving out there. It was a lot of fun over here with my family. We had some food, we watched some football, played some board games, that sort of stuff. What you're supposed to do over there on Thanksgiving. But hopefully it treated you guys just as nicely out there, and we can work on adding on top of that fun over here on Friday afternoon.